saying to go ahead and start. He didn't want to hold up the meeting. Thank you for meeting. And I know we've had a lot of back and forth, and I appreciate the House work. I can't tell you how much we appreciate it. We would like to make you an offer. Eddie has the information and the details. Mr. Chairman, we did make a couple of tweaks, minor tweaks, but again, the House has demonstrated their position, their strong position on this legislation, and we respect that. And so, Eddie, would you mind going over the details? Thank you.
Sure. So the document that I've passed out is the fiscal impact table associated with this offer, and then at the top there is a header that kind of describes it, and so I'll do my best to describe it. It is generally similar to House Bill 2036 that was vetoed and not overridden. There are two key changes to it, I would say. The first of those is that the standard deduction amounts relative to 2036 and relative to current law both are increased by this proposal to $4,000 for single filers, $6,750 for head of household filers, and $9,000 for married couples filing joint returns. Of course, under current law, those amounts are $3,500, $3,500, $6,000, and $8,000. House Bill 2036, the previous version of it, included a 3% increase to each of those amounts. And the other change is that lower bracket, which was reduced from 5.25 to 5.15 under the previous version of House Bill 2036, is being reduced from 5.25 to 5.2 under this version. That is the entirety of the changes relative to the previous version of House Bill 2036. I can walk through the line by line here, but other than that, it's the same. So I'd probably be better to just pause and either stand for questions or let you all discuss it.
Thank you, Eddie. And Mr. Chairman, I just want to confirm that this is not a tax increase for any Kansan again.
As I look through these numbers, it looks like percentage-wise, from where we're at currently, this does make a fairly significant increase in the standard deduction, which I know in the Senate's version of 2036, the three-tier version, that was one, and I think in the governor's plan, that was one of the things that made that plan work, was the increase in the standard deduction. So looks like we've got a 14.3% increase on the singles, 12.5% increase for head of household and joint filers. Fiscal note appears to be the same. I spoke on the House floor on the override, and I said it's not getting any cheaper, and it looks like it didn't. But it looks like it's about a $3.5–4 million increase on the annual fiscal notes.
Somewhere in that ballpark. It is a little bit more on that first year because of the retroactivity, but it's right in that ballpark once the fully annualized amount in the out years.
And I did have somebody ask me, I might ask staff, I just wanted to clarify, the language is still contained in here that requires that SGF transfer due to any reductions from the statewide mill levy, either reduction in the mill levy or an increase in the residential exemption.
And yes, that provision would also be included in the underlying proposal.
Senator Peck.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I've got a question as it relates to the elimination of the food sales tax, and I'm going to direct this towards staff because it would not be directed toward the House. Having been around the Capitol for a while, I have heard many times over the years that it takes 90 days to implement a sales tax change. And at July 1st, we're not 90 days out now. And my question would be, can this reasonably be implemented by July 1st, elimination of the grocery sales tax?
Our office has had these discussions with the Department of Revenue, and the key as it relates to this is that if retailers fail to effectively get it done by July 1st, they're not going to be penalized, but that's going to kind of be between the consumer and the retailer, basically. But the department can get their publications out in a timely fashion, and it's really a question of whether retailers can in fact handle it. Based upon the discussions I'd had earlier in the year, at the very least for large retailers, it's not likely to be a problem. For mom and pops that are trying to do this, more manually, so to speak, it's possible that it could be a burden, but they're not going to be penalized by the Department of Revenue because of the fact that we haven't given them the required window associated with these changes from the streamline agreement. They basically would have any penalties for having the wrong tax rate be waived.
And so would that waiver be in effect for 90 days?
Basically, my understanding is for whatever, it would be in effect from whenever the Department of Revenue publishes the rate change to 90 days later, if that makes sense. And so if they publish it 50 days prior to July 1, it would extend for 40 days beyond July 1.
And so I'm going to just throw this out. I'm not negotiating, but I would personally be more comfortable, Madam Chairman, if we moved the implementation date to, say, September 1st, October 1st, something like that, for our merchants to relieve some stress, particularly the smaller merchants. The big box stores, not concerned about. So I just thought I would throw that out, Madam Chairman. For what it's worth, not worth a whole lot, but you didn't pay much for it either. Thank you.
Madam Chair, I might address that because that was a big concern that I had when we had a April 1st date in the original House Bill 2284, I think it was, the very first tax bill that we kicked out early on. The longer it took to try to take up the override on that became very, very, I think it was within 30 days. And had some discussions with not only Department of Revenue, but also a lot of my mom and pop retailers in my district. And they said, the initial change when we started treating food sales tax differently, that was a big programming change. Every single one of the ones that I talked to said, this is just a matter of going in and instead of having 2%, putting in the 0%, because that was a big concern of mine. They said, not really that big a deal. It's just a matter of changing the rate. It don't have to change all the programming codes and their point-of-sale systems and things like that. So I do understand that concern, and I had that concern on 2284 because the longer it took us to override that veto, we were getting really close to that April 1st date. But they did assure me that it should be a fairly easy change. I'm not saying that it would be for everybody, but.
Mr. Chairman, I appreciate and Senator Peck, the comments and input. We've discussed that date for many times now. I've expressed my concerns. I would have concern making that notable change in this legislation at this time. The House has been very clear on their position, and like I said, we want to respect that and respect the Senate position and defend it. And that would be July 1st.
Madam Chair, unless there's any other questions or discussion, the House is prepared to accept the changes proposed changing the rate from 5.15 up to 5.20, and then the increases in the standard deduction.
Okay, there's no other questions, and I want to thank the House. I know that the House understands this, and I'm hoping my colleagues in the Senate will too. This legislation helps low-income, medium-income families more than anyone else. It's the biggest change for those individuals, and I just appreciate your efforts and your work on this. Senator Holland.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So just so I understand, our current rate structure has 3 tiers. We're sticking with the House's proposed 2, correct? Okay, very good. And I'm just going to ask this question to you then, Mr. House Chairman. Looking at the cost of the fiscal note in the out years, do you feel comfortable that you can hit that on the budget?
Well, I would love to serve on appropriations, but I don't. They would not be happy if I did, because I would probably cut a lot more of it. You know, there's 2 sides to balancing the budget. One of them is the revenue, and the other one is cutting the budget and maintaining a responsible spending level. And I know, looking at the CCR that just hit our desk in the House a little while ago, looks like we added even more to the budget in the omnibus package. So I hate the fact that we seem to want to balance the budget on the backs of the taxpayers. If we force this tax relief into our state law, it forces us to be more responsible on the budget. I wish I could guarantee more than that, trust me, but we need to manage our budget as well.
Madam Chair, I'll be needing to sign agree to disagree. I am very much in opposition to going to a 2-tiered structure. And I don't personally believe these numbers are sustainable. And if we pass this in 3 years, I won't be here, but then you all can deal with the fiscal consequences. Thank you.
Thank you. We will do the agree to disagree, and we will debate it on the floor again. It'll be interesting. And Mr. Chairman, I will be using your quote, balancing the budget on the backs of the taxpayers. So thank you.
I just want to make sure we're clear. We're working on Senate Bill 37, right? This is okay. Just want to.
So we're in agreement on that. And would you mind if we go ahead and continue with 2096, negotiating on it? Okay, thank you. So do you want to review the provisions are there, or do you want me to just, okay, great.
2096, as the first conference committee had agreed to it, included, I believe, 7 provisions. The first of those was the Veterans Valor Property Tax Relief Act, which provided for a refund of property taxes up to 75% of the amount actually and timely paid to veterans that are permanently and totally disabled. The second was a series of changes to the homeowners property tax freeze program, which included naming that program. The program is currently unnamed. It would have increased the income amount to $80,000, increased the home valuation amount to $500,000. It would have excluded Social Security benefits from the definition of household income. And those changes would have been retroactive to tax year 2022, and it would have provided for an extended filing period for those prior year changes. The third item was the property tax exemption for businesses located in cities where a facility owned or operated by a governmental entity competes against the business or within 5 miles of such a facility. The fourth provision was a property tax exemption for certain tangible personal properties, including ATVs, off-road vehicles, snowmobiles, motorized bicycles, trailers with gross weight of 15,000 pounds or less, used for personal use and not for the production of income, watercraft and trailers and motors associated with that watercraft. The next provision was an exclusion from the definition of valid sales for property valuation purposes attributable to three types of transactions: Section 1031 exchanges, build-to-suit transactions, and sale-leaseback arrangements. The sixth item was a provision requiring additional years' worth of information on property valuation notices. And the final provision was additional exceptions to the prohibition related to the payment under protest appeal proceedings and when they can be undertaken by taxpayers. And so with that, I would stand for questions related to those provisions, or you can just discuss and debate them.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, we would like to work on this. Did you have some questions for it? Okay, okay. We do have a couple of offers. I know that the House had some concern. Obviously, they sent it back. You know, I wish it was just the six of us. That's not how it works. And I'm glad it's not. There's 165 legislators in this body, and each one has a vote. And yes, different ones have different opinions, different priorities. And so what I'd like to propose on the language of Senate Bill 311, what is being referred to as, which doesn't exist, the dark store, is removing all of that language except the 1031 exchange, the original bill. I'd also like to propose that we, instead of the household income on the property tax freeze, we change that to the homeowner's total adjusted gross income. And the reason I'm recommending that is for auditing purposes. I think it would be easier to catch fraud. As for the government competition piece, again, it's 165 legislators, and I know some want it out. What we've done is we've come up with some ideas to tighten it, to narrow it, make it more palatable. And one of those is a major change. It is a rebate program instead of just an exemption of property taxes. And so it's modeled after rebate language that we currently have in statute. I can let Amelia talk to that, but it would only be the offending county or city government that has the business that would be responsible for the rebate. And if there was a question over the rebate, it could go to BOTA for a ruling. But if you'd like more details, Amelia definitely has those. And then there's other changes. We just like to firm up the language. I think you and I were in sync on this. We absolutely know there was no intent. If the business existed first and the government came in, that would trigger this legislation. We're just clarifying that language. We're going to clarify the language too on the restaurants, that if it's an educational, and we already have this in, that if it's dominant or predominant business is education, then it is not in competition. But we just want to clarify that so that everybody understands, you know, if you have a school that has a restaurant that they're teaching and they do serve food, that they're not in competition with the other. We just want to clarify that language. That, and I think we did that with predominant, but we're going to make some more people comfortable.
If you don't mind, is there a situation, I'm trying to think of an example of a situation like that. Is there like a culinary school somewhere that would have an open restaurant? Is that?
Wichita State University,
Okay.
I'm told, has one. So that was a concern. We just wanted to make sure that it was clear that they are not competing with the local restaurants.
Okay.
They're for education purposes. Amelia just reminded me, since we're taking it down to county and city for the rebates, it's not an issue for Wichita State, so we're fine on that language.
Am I misunderstanding? So even though the college would be a government entity, it would not, maybe I'm not understanding that right.
Well, its main function is education, not the restaurant, so that's what it would exclude it. But what we're doing is we're paring this down even further so that schools wouldn't be part of the competition piece. What this is just shot across the bow. This is saying, government, please do not compete with private business. That's all this is. And so we're trying to get it across the line so that we can say, please, governments, shut down these businesses, do not operate them. Because as soon as, that's the other language that we want to make clear in this, as soon as the government stops operating the business or sells the business, then the business would, they would come back, the rebate would, the trigger would be gone for this legislation.
Any chance we want to add hotels into that?
Mr. Chairman, if you want to, that's your call.
I just want to make sure I understand, because I really like this rebate idea. That's actually a concept that I had considered 3 or 4 years ago when this kind of came back to the surface. But, so it's just cities and counties that would be considered government entities if there was a high school or a college that had a daycare facility or a gym or a restaurant.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to make it clear, we are scoping it down quite a bit. We do have a problem with schools competing, but this would just be for counties and cities.
Okay.
So yes, we are scaling it back at this time. Hopefully the schools will get the message and they will see that they are on the radar.
Okay. And is this, the rebate that they would be qualifying for, is that their full property taxes, or is it just the portion that would be the offending government, that if it was the city that put in a restaurant, they would just have to refund their city portion of their property taxes?
That is correct.
Okay. Okay.
We're trying to simplify it as much as possible so that, I know there was heartburn. I listened to the debate. I listened to our colleagues, and I understand they want it pulled, but the reality is this bill will not go forward without that legislation in it. And there are pieces in this bill that I do not want to lose, that we've worked very diligently for. And so we're working to find that sweet spot where everybody can get on board.
Sure. The other question I had to do with the 5-mile radius. I know you and I had talked briefly about this. I can't remember if if Amelia was a part of that conversation, but when we consider the 5-mile radius, let's say there's a situation where there's a river. On one side of the river is one city, on the other side of the river is a different city. Does that 5-mile radius encompass the entire radius, or is it just within the jurisdiction? Is there any way we could limit that to where if one city put a restaurant on the riverfront, that doesn't exempt or qualify the businesses on the other side of the river for a refund or a rebate because they're a completely different jurisdiction?
Amelia?
I think the concepts that is being talked about would still encompass a 5-mile radius language, but in the context of how the rebate would work, that the rebate amount, the rebate amount is calculated based on the amount that the city or county levied on the property. And so if the property is not within that city, there would be no amount to rebate.
Yes. Okay, that clarifies that. Yes, perfect. Thank you. Would we be pretty close to being able to see that language? I think I really like
Handout
that.
for you.
Okay, perfect.
It's rough.
Okay.
It is a draft. Mr. Chairman, while that's being handed out, I would also like to add, I know it's a provision that's not currently in the bill, but I would like to add the child care tax credit. The language that's in 20, or actually currently in Senate Bill 96. CCR 96.
If I remember right, that's at 100%.
If it's not, I'm offering 100%. We're offering 100%.
Madam Chair, I was just clarifying if we would pass something other than 100% on that child and dependent care tax credit, and Senate Bill 96 actually still passes at 100%, that we have conflicting law. So I think if we add that in, we'll have to leave it at 100% just to avoid that situation. You know where I stand on that, I think. Usually I like 50% at the most, maybe 75, but to include that in this, I think we need to remain consistent with what's currently in Senate Bill 96. If you don't mind waiting, I just want to read through the language that Amelia had passed out.
No, I don't mind, Mr. Chairman, and I just wanted to respond. You and I are on the same page on any credit being very rich, anything over 50%. And we do have concerns. But again, we're negotiating with 3 people in the room. Well, more than 3, but the reality is the governor, she would like 100%. And in order to have her consider this legislation, I think we're going to have that piece in.
Amelia, I have a question here. Since we're changing this to kind of a rebate program, is there some type of process, or is it, they would just probably follow the current appeals process if they qualified for this, but then the government never offered or issued that rebate or that refund? Would the business have a small claim to, or how would they go about trying to recover that money?
There would, I think, the explicit language of what was handed out would provide that if it were denied, if the request were denied, that they could appeal to the Board of Tax Appeals. But I think your question has to do with what if they just don't do anything, maybe. And at that point, it's probably a claim at district court.
Just to speed things up, Amelia, on the definitions of governmental entity, real property and personal property, basically the paragraphs 1, 2, and 3, are those substantially the same as what was currently, I think, in Senate Bill 8, as we had passed it last year?
Mr. Chair, they are substantially similar, but there are a few differences to account for the fact that this is drafted as a rebate program and to encompass the same city and within 5-mile radius kind of has been incorporated into the definitions here. The restaurant for educational purposes is also included. And then also the governmental in paragraph 2 is limited to county or city.
Mr. Chairman, I want to make a clarification. I did say the homeowners adjusted gross income on the property tax freeze. We want to make it all residents of the home. So it's not the household income, but it's everybody in the house's adjusted gross income. So that way we can, it's easier to audit is all I'm looking for, a number that can be tracked, not just saying the household income, but you're saying the adjusted gross of each member of that household.
Okay.
Just want to make sure.
Yeah, I was. And I also when you were going over that, I also had the question, well, what if the homeowner doesn't live there, if it's like their son or somebody? So it's the residents of the household, their adjusted gross income.
So we're saying household income, but we're just making clear that it's the adjusted gross, Kansas adjusted
Kansas
gross. Thank you.
adjusted gross. Okay.
Kansas adjusted gross. Thank you.
The KAGI. Okay. Madam Chair, I think reading through this on the rebate program, there's a lot to digest here, but I think that's a lot of stuff that I like. I think it's functioning the way I would want this to work if I would have drafted a government competition bill. It does limit the scope tremendously, but it still does offer some relief to a business that is a private business that has had a government entity come in and basically create a competing business within that industry. I like the fact that it's no longer punitive towards any other tax entity that isn't responsible for that competing business. I would like just a chance, and I'm not sure if we're wanting to try to finalize this report right now, but I would like a chance to reach out to some of my local government people. I think they would be on board with this, but I'd like just a small amount of time to reach out to them and see what their thoughts on that were. But
Well, Mr. Chairman, I can't force your hand on anything, but time is limited, and I do know that we could possibly lose the legislation if we don't have it in time. And my concern is, I know that you are aware of this, fully aware of this. There are members, colleagues that do not understand the legislative process. On 2096, when the House referred it back to committee, I was not able to call a conference on that. I am not blocking this legislation. And I know you understand that. But false information, you know, I never liked the term fake news, but boy, I'm starting to appreciate it. I think it's a reality. And this legislation, I know it's been dear to the ranking's heart. He's worked very hard on it. And since we have both worked very hard on it, thank you. And I would hate to come this close and lose this legislation for a second year in a row. So, Mr. Chairman, you take all the time you need, but please don't run out.
no, not my intention at all, and I understand we're not the 11th hour, but the 245th hour on this. So, so right now I've got that we are limiting the 311 to the 1031 exchange language only, changing the property tax freeze program to just the homeowners or the households Kansas adjusted gross income, and then the rebate provisions. Is there any other changes that the Senate would be? Did I miss anything, or is that? Oh, yes, the child tax credit. Yeah. I forgot to make that note. So.
Mr. Chairman, we want to make sure that the House is comfortable on it. This legislation has passed the Senate a couple of times. I find it interesting, the government competition piece passed the House last year, but they did not like it this year, so we tried to be aware of that. And hopefully we found a compromise that everybody can agree with. We've worked hard to, and I have to give full credit where credit's due, the rebate program. I had actually heard you mention that, so I appreciate it. I heard a good idea, and my English teacher told me a good idea is always a borrowed idea, so thank you.
I'm never opposed to stealing somebody else's good idea. Not that I'm going to take credit for it, but yeah, could you give us 5 minutes perhaps, and we'll try to come back and. Okay. Madam Chair, I think we're really close on this. I was visiting with Amelia a little bit on the word predominantly in the government competition. We would like to clarify a definition on what constitutes that. She was saying, you know, when that word goes to courts, sometimes judges interpret that differently. The situation that was brought to my attention when we were on break was the Sedgwick County Zoo, where there's a restaurant right across the street. You know, folks have to pay an admission to get into that zoo. The restaurant in the zoo is a very small, square footage wise, it's very small compared to the entire zoo, but it is predominantly a restaurant, that building, so we want to make sure that that situation would not constitute competition for area restaurants. But we're going to work on that. If you don't mind, we need to go up and get on the floor to do the agree to disagree. I don't know what's your schedule in the Senate for floor?
Could we run both agrees to disagree? I guess ours would originate, we have an agree to disagree for 2096 also.
Oh, we do? Okay. Okay, yeah, we can do them both at the same time then.
Senator Holland.
Thank you. Yeah, I need to explain this. So I do appreciate the Madam Chair winnowing out the Senate Bill 311 to just the 1031 to have time to talk with some folks in the counties. They're comfortable with that language. I still, though, I am concerned about certain just scenarios of where you may have a city maintained pool or something, or say even a city like gym room, a weight room, that may run afoul with a commercial operator of a pool or a gym saying, hey, this is unfair government competition. I am diametrically opposed to calling that a example of unfair government competition. And so I want to be sure I understand what types of scenarios out there are looking. I will take time to read through this. But right now, with that piece in there, I need to sign an agree or disagree because I just don't feel comfortable with the scenarios that might fold up. Thank you.
Okay, and if we can address that, I understand, and if we can address that in that predominantly definition, I'd be more than happy to see what we could do, because, yeah, a little small weight room in any facility shouldn't constitute competition with a full-scale gym. That would be my opinion, but, so, Madam Chair, if we could perhaps run these and come back 3:30 or whenever we can get back as quick as possible.
Absolutely, Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate you guys. We do not want unintended consequences, but we have to we have to put this shot across the bow. And we all know that the most egregious is the Hotel Topeka bot. That's the best example. It brings everybody on board when you tell it. I'm not comfortable adding that piece at this time just because it didn't cross either chamber. So I would prefer we not do that if we can get this language whittled down. I just got a text that lobbyists are already trying to kill this without even knowing where we landed on it. And so that is extremely disappointing. Taxpayer-funded lobbyists, again. Mr. Chairman, I appreciate your work and your help on this. I'm hoping we can get it as soon as possible. Thank you.
And we'll stay in touch and make an announcement on when we can come back and continue conference.
Yes, I'm afraid the clock's going to run out and there will be people in the building happy. Mr. Chairman, I do not want to lose the property tax freeze for veterans or for senior citizens, and I sure don't want to lose the Veterans of Valor program, the Valor Veterans Program, and the exemption on the personal ATVs and other equipment. So hopefully, Mr. Chairman, we can get back soon, and I appreciate all your effort. Thank you.